Alrighty, good morning. So we're going to start with part one of tissues, the shoot apical meristem. So, kind of I don't know if it's a refresher or not, but just kind of the definition of what a tissue is it's just an aggregation of a lot of cells that function together to do a certain job. So sometimes they're made up of the same type of cell, sometimes they're not. But in plants, there are two different types of tissues. You can have simple tissues and you can have complex tissues. Simple tissues, obviously the names kind of give it away. With simple tissues, you're going to only have one type of cell. So it's just going to be made up of parenchyma cells or collenchyma cells or something like that. So to kind of review, if you remember your parenchyma tissue, it's going to be made obviously of just parenchyma cells, and those are used primarily for storage, sometimes photosynthesis. Your collenchyma cells are also used for storage, some structure. Actually, that should say structure. I apologize. This should say structure. Not really for storage. Structure. And your sclerenchyma cells are there for support. So those are the different types of simple tissues, just parenchyma tissue, collenchyma tissue, sclerenchyma tissue. So we're essentially talking about a collection of parenchyma cells working together, or a collection of collenchyma cells, etc. Your complex tissues, those are going to be made up of more than one type of cell. So the three major types of complex tissues found in plants are primary xylem, primary phloem, and your epidermis or your dermal tissue. So those are your three different types of complex tissues. Your primary xylem and your primary phloem make up what's called your vascular tissue. So it's kind of like when we talk about vascular tissue in the body, it's usually referencing the blood or the blood vessels. So being able to move things through tissues. In this case, it would be blood vessels. So it's kind of the same concept with your xylem and your phloem, but except they're not moving blood, they're just moving water or sugars through those tissues. But your primary job of your primary xylem is to give your cells some support, but really it's to move minerals and water where it needs to go, because the water is going to carry dissolved minerals and nutrients. But primarily it's for the minerals and water transport. And then the four things that your primary xylem are going to be made up of would be tracheids, vessel elements, fiber, and parenchyma cells. The fiber is there for extra support. So if you recall, we're talking those are those specific types of sclerenchyma cells. So those are those four things. Make sure you know those four things. So what the primary xylem is made of. Your phloem, primary phloem, is the second complex tissue, and its job is to conduct or move sugar. That's really all all it's there for. So it's also made up of 4 different things, and that would be your sieve tube elements and its companion cell. Because if you remember, after cytokinesis, since the sieve tube element is essentially, I'm not going to say dead, but since it doesn't have that nucleus or functioning organelles, it needs that companion cell. So wherever you see the sieve tube element, you're going to see the companion cell. It's also made up of fiber in that specific type of sclerenchyma cell. And again, just like it was in the primary xylem, it's there for extra support and structure. And you're also going to have parenchyma cells making up this particular tissue. So, individually, parenchyma cells could be their own tissue, but since they're being combined with fiber and sieve tube elements and companion cells, that's why we would call it a complex tissue. So again, make sure you know what it does and the 4 components that make up your primary phloem. Your last complex tissue is your epidermis, or your dermal layer. These are going to be located on the outside of your plant tissue. So when we start talking about your shoot apical meristem and then later your root apical meristem, they're all going to have an epidermis. It's essentially identical to that of the human epidermis, which is our skin, our outer covering that protects us and keeps stuff in and keeps other stuff out. So that's basically what it does here with the plant cell, or the plant tissues, rather. Sorry, not the cell. So it's going to form around the individual cells that are making up these tissues. So its main thing, since we're talking plants, is going to prevent dehydration, since water is so essential to plants. On our diagram here in just a second, you're going to see that there are these little things called guard cells that are going to open and close for gas exchange. Think of them kind of like the proteins, the integral proteins that we have in our cell membrane, except your guard cells are only going to let gas in and out. Your epidermis is oftentimes going to be covered by this waxy layer called your cutin. And then the 3 things that make up your epidermis would be your epidermal cells, your guard cells, and your trichomes, or sometimes little hairs that stick off of your tissue. So we'll go ahead now and look at the diagram, and I'll explain that. So we're really just looking at that top layer right there, the top doodle. So this is, it's just going to show you the epidermis. Really, we're not going to get into the primary xylem and phloem yet. We'll get more into those structures next week. Well, I guess we'll kind of get into them we'll get into them next week on Monday when we talk about the shoot apical meristem, and we'll get into it also when we're talking about the root and the root anatomy and the root apical meristem. So, but anyway, up here, this is kind of a close-up of your epidermis. So you've got your individual epidermal cells there, because that's one of the primary components. And then in this particular diagram, I've drawn the cuticle, which is made of cutin. It's that waxy layer that provides some extra protection from dehydration. I've just drawn this as kind of a layer above the epidermal cells. And then if you notice on the very top, you have the trichomes, which are those little hairs that are sticking out. You've got 2 different kinds. You've got non-glandular trichomes and you've got glandular trichomes. The ones on the left are the non-glandular, and the one on the right is the glandular. Their main difference is that the glandular are going to house some sort of chemical or oil or something of that nature that can be released. For example, peppermint is stored in these little glandular trichomes. If you've ever felt peppermint leaves, they're kind of fuzzy. So these are those trichomes. And then if you look over on the far left, you've got those guard cells. They come in pairs, so you're going to have a right and a left there. And I've shown this. It's kind of like the carrier proteins in the cell membrane. They're going to open and close. And so on either end. So right now it's open to the what I would call the inside of the cell because it's on the epidermal side, not the cuticle side. And so I've drawn that arrow to show that things would enter. Obviously, the bottom part of those guard cells would be touching, and then the top parts would be open, so they would just be reversed than what they're drawn in the picture there. You know, your gases would come in this way. Your guard cell would then shut on the top and then open on the bottom, so the gas could then pass through, kind of like the lock on rivers. So the lock system on rivers. So that's how they're going to get stuff through there. Your guard cells are also going to have those little dots there. Those are the chloroplasts. And then the empty space there in between is going to be known as the stoma. So things are going to basically pass through those ends of the guard cells and then kind of hang out in the stoma until one end closes and the other end opens, and it can either enter or leave. If you have multiple, so for that's singular, I've written that there. That means it's singular. If you wanted to talk about multiple stoma, you would call them stomata. So I'm not really going to go you over that, but just so you know, when I'm referencing stoma or stomata, it's just singular or plural. You don't call them stomas. So, but that's where we're going to kind of stop for now. On Monday, we'll finish up and we'll talk about your primary growth and your shoot apical meristem. And then a couple of different cell wall thickenings that can occur with that growth. So, like always, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Hopefully, this is making some sense. If we're going too fast or we're going too slow, again, please let me know because we can definitely slow down or we can quicken the pace. So, but anyway, hope this all makes sense and hope you have a great weekend.